Anything else?
My talk is a lot more extensive, and I apologize. It's about a half an hour. So, but I'm going into much more detail. I was originally asked to talk about frame storage, and some people had a couple questions, and Donna had asked, "Would you give a talk on frame storage?" And I said, I just obtained my master beekeeper certification, so I said, let me go into a little more detail. We'll talk about winter pests. Emma touched on them briefly, but I'm going to go into a little more depth into it. So hopefully you'll gain some additional knowledge. So we're just going to touch on varroa mites. I know everyone's probably tired of hearing about varroa mites, but we'll just quickly touch on them. We'll talk about wax moths, small hive beetles, mice, and then skunks. So mite control has to start in spring. People think about mites June, July, and then I've talked to so many beekeepers. I'll say in June, July, did you treat for mites? No, it was too hot. I couldn't treat. It's too late. If you haven't already treated your hives, started at least looking at your mites by June. It's too late. I start my mite counts in May. Once a month, I run 40 hives. I do mite counts once a month. It's a half a cup of bees, 300 mites. So if people have not looked at it, the Honeybee Health Coalition has a phenomenal online guide. And when you check for mites, you want to check your mites for the threshold based on the time of year, whether they're in a dormant phase, they're in a growing phase, they're in a steady state phase, or they're in a population decrease. And then you want to treat accordingly. These are the treatment thresholds that are currently approved. I've heard some talk that they're actually going to decrease those treatment thresholds because of all the viruses that the varroa mites are causing, and people just not reacting to the varroa counts. So I think I've shown this slide before. I did give a talk last fall, but there again, it's the Bee-Informed Partnership. You'll see the blue line is the bee population as it increases. May, June, where our peak population, the mites are much farther behind. But as we cross that barrier in August, the mite population has then has grown higher than the bee population. And normally we think of one mite going into a brood cell. This time of year, there's 2-3 mites going into a brood cell. So you know what's going to happen. We're going to see deformed wing virus, parasitic mite syndrome. Those are the 2 Israeli acute viruses, some of the paralysis viruses. Those are the 2 viruses that are caused from varroa. Next, we're going to talk, again, I just talked briefly. I'm going to talk about treatments. If anybody has any questions afterwards, we can talk about treatments. I have a 90 to 100% success rate on my hives every year. Last year, I had 100% success rate. I was treating 3 times a year, Formic, Apigard, and oxalic acid in the winter. I've been working a lot with Hiroshi and Ed this year, and they're pretty much as treatment-free or very little treatment. I'm trying to move towards that. I manage my mites very tightly. Most of my hives have not had Apigard this year. A couple of them have, but my mite counts have been 0, 1, 2, and 3. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe next year I'll be telling a whole different story. I'll be going back to my 3 treatments a year. The lesser wax moth is the one that we see the most of. It's the smaller of the wax moth in size. It has gray, light brown color. As their eggs, a wax moth will lay about 250 to 300 eggs. They hatch in about a week, 5 to 8 days. The larvae are about a ½ inch long. They feed for about 1 to 6 months. Okay, it depends on the time of year, how warm it is, and then they go into pupation stage, which are essentially cocoons. And I think Emma showed a picture of cocoons. They'll attach to your woodenware, your frames, your hide bodies. They can actually destroy your hide bodies, and they take about a 1 week to 2 months, depending on the time of year, to emerge. The greater wax moth is the one that's more of a concern. Luckily, they're not as prevalent, but they're probably the ones that Donna has that has destroyed her hive. They're larger, they're wider, stockier. They have the way that their wings fold in. It's almost like a shingle-like appearance, and it's kind of a mottled grayish brownish color. You can't really see in the picture, but they almost look like they have eyes. You can see the eyes on heads. They lay about 50 to 150 eggs, not as many eggs, but they hatch in about 1 week to 3 weeks. Take a little longer to hatch, but the larvae are larger. They're about a 1-inch long larva. They can destroy the larvae as they feed on your comb. They can destroy your comb. They feed on the honey, the pollen, bee bread. They can destroy your comb in about 10 to 14 days. So if you have a weak hive, that's probably what happened to you. Again, then they go into pupation stage, the same thing, about 1 week to 2 months for pupation stage. The way you can tell the differences, and I'll show you pictures of the comparison. The wax, if you ever try to squish a worm, when the larvae on the bottom, they're very easy to squish. You know, you can just hit them with your hive tool, they squish real easy, or just press on them, they squish real easy. They have 3 pro legs at the front and 4 in the center. Again, I apologize, the lighting's a little harder to see the picture. But the way to control it is keep a strong hive. The more population, the better. George talked about make sure your hive is the right size. Keep your hives condensed. I know a lot of people that store their extra equipment, their extra brood bodies, their extra frames on top of their hive above their inner cover over the winter with a screen in their inner cover. Well, the bees can't get to it. They can't patrol it. They can't clean it up. So you can destroy your comb over winter if you store your equipment above your hive. The other thing, I just kind of anecdotally, I run screen bottom boards. I was doing whiteboards, some oxalic treatments, just to kind of, because I wasn't able to do some treatments or do counts. I use a little Pam on my whiteboard, just a little grease of Vaseline. I saw a lot of dead small hive beetles, the lesser, not small hive beetles, wax moths, lesser wax moths. They like to go down the screens. It's a good way, another way of controlling them. They'll go down and then they get stuck on the board. So wax moth damage. First picture is a wax moth wormhole. So they'll go down, they'll burrow into the bottom of your comb, and they'll chew holes, and they'll travel in the comb in a line. So you'll see that line of the meshing. So when those trails, those silken trails, they're littered with their feces. You can see how they can muck your comb up. The other interesting thing, if you ever see uncapped brood cells, bald brood, if you see it in a line, chances are it's wax moths. So the bees are taking off those cappings, investigating what's going on. They know something's going on with that brood cell. And then the next picture is a frame that's been destroyed. And then these are the cocoons of the pupating on the frames. So winter storage. I know Emma talked a little bit about this. You want to freeze your comb. She's talked about 2 hours, 2 days. What I've read actually is that the eggs can actually survive in the winter, and then they'll go into an animated state. And then in the springtime, when it gets warm enough, or we get some warm winter days, they'll reanimate, and then they'll hatch. The eggs will emerge, and then you can have wax moth damage. So 2 days you want to freeze your comb for. We talked about the moth crystals. Paramoth is the approved brand. I know most people use wax crystals that are available on the market, but as Emma said, wax crystals, not mothballs. 2 different products. Naphthalene is the wax. I keep saying wax. I'm sorry. The mothballs. Paradichlorobenzene is the wax crystals. I learned this little trick. Remember, N means no, P means permissible. So if you remember that, you're golden. Light and air. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but light and air is very helpful to prevent the wax moths. Do not like light and air, though they like dark locations. A bug zapper. I think I made whether Chester County or Montgomery County. They actually put a bug zapper above where they store their combs. The wax moths are attracted to the light. It's not a guarantee, but it can help. B402 Certain is what I use. Phenomenal product. I was leery for it's not inexpensive, but it's a phenomenal product. You dissolve the crystals in some water using a guard sprayer, or if you have a small amount of comb, you can use a little spray bottle. Spray it on your combs, let them dry before you store it. I made the mistake of not letting them dry, put them in the stack. They were moldy in the spray. I usually put them up on end. I run a fan across them, to, for 12 or so hours to dry them out, and then you can then store them. You don't even have to put a lid or anything on them. That when the wax moths actually go and eat through, if they try to start eating through the comb, those crystals, those dry crystals, are like razor blades. It will shred them. Yes, Chris.
Is Sertan a bacteria?
It is. It is a fungus. Right? Yeah, it's a yeah.
Right. So my question here is, you're talking about crystals. Is it the crystal or the bacteria gets in your gut? Because I know, like for
I'm sorry. Yeah, bacteria. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just because I know, like for cabbage leaf, you put down dipel.
Yeah.
Which is the same stuff, different species of bacteria, and that messes up their gut. Doesn't it do the same thing for them, though?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that I learned too is when you do it in an area that the bees can't get to it, because what will happen is when it's wet, the bees will actually will go in, they smell the comb, they think they smell the honey, everything, they'll lick it up, so then that'll be gone. So make sure when you dry it in the area the bees don't have access to it. Believe me, the bees will find your super, especially if you're doing this time of year, they'll find it quick enough. It comes like a powder. It's a tiny crystal. Yeah, it's more expensive. It's more expensive. Yeah, it's more expensive in the liquid because it's pre-made. So there's another product on the market called Zenteri. So the product that's used is Bacillus thermogeline. It's the only one that's used for moth control. They use it on plants. It's a lot cheaper. It comes in a pound-sized bag. Share it with your friends. You'll get the whole club to probably do it with that product. It's the only, you have to make sure it's the Bacillus thermogeline that you're using, or I can't remember the exact pronunciation of the last word, but that's another product that can be used.
So this is residual, it stays on the comb. So when you put it back in your hive, it's still there.
It's still there.
Protect them to a certain extent.
Yes. So example, I had some really old dark comb that I put in a swarm trap. And I thought, oh, it's going to have wax. And I had treated it with this before. It stayed in my swarm trap all spring, early summer. It was perfect. Not an issue at all. I'm sorry? No, unfortunately not. But my comb was so good. I'm sorry? I use them for honey supers and any brood chamber. No, not at all. It's not toxic at all to the bees.
It's a bacteria. It's not a chemical.
So people say that you only have to worry about wax moths and brood chamber. The wax moths, they will destroy. And if there's not enough, so I've had some even wax foundation that's like extra wax my foundation. I've seen wax moths starting to. They'll eventually run out of food, but they feed on pollen and the honey. There's no food for them, so they won't really survive that long. But they will ruin your comb, and your comb is the most important thing. Yeah. Well, no, the comb attracts the bees. So the smell of the comb and they can smell it a mile away. So they'll come and they'll be all over and they'll suck up all that liquid, not realizing that there's no liquid. There's nothing left for it to dry for the wax moth. So, but again, if you're running a couple the moth crystals were great if you're running. I mean, that's what I did for years. I ran moth crystals. The problem with moth crystals, you have to let it all air out for about 24 hours before you put it on the hive. You got to constantly replenish those moth crystals because they will evaporate. It's a little bit of it's more work, but this stuff is great. I mean, again, I've bought bags. I've shared with my friends and give them, if you only have 3 or 4 hives, you only need a couple tablespoons and you're good to go for the season. So this is how after I've treated my hives, I stack them. I've cut plywood boards put on top. The only reason I do this is not for the, because obviously it's not knowing light the air is getting, but I'm not worried about it. I already have the sertine on there. It keeps, my John Deere Gator is in the garage, so I'm always bringing bees in the garage. So it's just to keep the bees out, because I've getting bees that get in my supers, and then if there's any pollen left over, they kind of muck things up. And then just as another good measure, I put bug zapper. I probably get more bees in there and stink bugs than I get wax moths, but what the heck, for $25, not hurting me. Small hive beetles, the next thing we're going to talk about, they're kind of ubiquitous now to our environment. They came from the sub-Saharan Africa, like everything, a lot of the other pests that we've come from Africa and Asia. The bees manage them by corralling them. You'll see, those propolis jails they put on the top of the frames. And they've actually tricked the bees into feeding them. So they'll put them in these jails, but what they'll do is they'll use their mouth parts and they'll rub the bees' face and mouth parts, and then the bees will do trophallaxis. They'll feed even though they jail them, they'll still feed them. So as soon as we open up the hives, we let all those beetles out. And I'm not saying don't go and inspect your hives because of small hive beetles, but unfortunately that's the case. So the small hive beetles can, and if you find them, kill them, smash them. They do transmit a little bit of eczema. There's been some studies have shown they do transmit some eczema, but the next point I'm going to talk about eggs. Kill them, smash them, hive tool, whack-a-mole, however you smash them, smash them. Go back. They can lay 3 days that they lay eggs. They can lay 1,000 to 2,000 eggs in 3 days. So that's why we see these populations increase at an exponential rate. The larvae are about 1/2 inch, and then they feed for about 2 weeks, 10 to 16 days, and then they go through a wandering phase. Usually at night, they leave the hive, they go down the soil, they go generally about 3 feet from the hive in most cases, unless they can't find, something that, like if you're on asphalt or you're on stone or areas that they can't really go and pupate. They go down about 4 inches into the soil, and they'll pupate anywhere from 1 month, about a month, but in the wintertime, they can pupate for a much longer period. And then they come out, they're adults, and then they start all over again. So, go ahead. The difference you'll notice with the small hive beetle, they're hard to squish. If you ever try to squish a small hive beetle larva, those buggers are hard. Usually what I do is if I find them on my whiteboard, or if I have, I'll usually just put them in some soapy water. I'll knock it, if you have debris on your whiteboard that a lot of times they'll feed on the whiteboards. I'll usually scrape that. If I see those larvae, make sure you scrape them into something that you kill them. Because if you put them on the ground, then you haven't done it. They have 3 pairs of perlites at the front, 2 rows of spines, and then 2 spines at the back. And they're about a 1/2 inch. Okay. So this is the difference between a wax moth versus a small hive beetle. We see larvae. Unless you want to look at these buggers really close, most people go, they don't want to look at them. So this is the picture. So the top one is the greater wax moth. The middle one is the lesser wax moth, and the small hive beetle is at the bottom. But again, the easiest test is you try to, try to squish them, and that'll tell you which one it is. So small hive beetle control, the biggest, keep strong hives. All these pests, the bees will keep them under control. Just keep a strong hive. Hot, sunny location. They say the wax moth. Oh, geez, I can't wax my mind. Wax moth, small hive beetles. Sorry. They're lesser. I have my hives in part sun, part shade, but the ones that are in deeper shade or a little more shadier, I don't like to work hives in the hot sun. It's just too damn hot. But if you keep them in, the shadier they are, the more problem you'll have. Minimal disruption. Again, I tell you, make sure you inspect your hives, but the more you disrupt them, the more you're disrupting your jails. Beetle traps work. There's a couple different manufacturers. Beetle Blaster is one of them. they work okay. Put a little bit of oil, a little bit of apple cider vinegar in there, vegetable oil, apple cider vinegar will attract them, but it evaporates and you have to keep filling it up. The beetles know how to keep above that oil level. You'll get some of them, but they like to get underneath the edges here, and they'll get under there. So usually what I do is I run my finger along the trap before I pull it out. Twister sheets is another thing people like to use. You'll get some beetles in there. The things that I don't like about them, I don't use them anymore. I tried them at one point. The bees like to pull, I have a lot of hygienic bees. They like to pull it through the hive. They'll pull it apart, and all those microfibers and all those plastics will get in your honey. So I personally don't like them. I don't recommend them, but they can work. The other thing that someone had taught me one time is corrugate plastic. So they're like the whiteboards we have. Cut a small section of it, tape one end, put them in the hive. The beetles will go into those corrugate and take them out, and then knock them into that hot soap or that soapy water. Diatomaceous earth. That's crystals. I'm sorry, my mind was on crystals. Diatomaceous earth. So the small hive beetles go into the ground. The diatomaceous earth will, when they go through that, they're like razor blades. It actually cuts their bodies up. But if you put it down, you can put it out on the ground 3 or 4 feet from the hive, spread it around, make sure you wet it down, because if the bees try to collect it like pollen, it'll hurt the bees also. Yep, right on top, sprinkle on top of it. Wet it down.
Don't wet it. I know I've read it. I said on down to wet it.
Yes. I don't use it, so if I
when it's low humidity, it works the best. Because when when you have high humidity, it doesn't affect it as much.
Okay. All right, so that's good. I mean, again, I apologize because I don't use it. So, and I've never used it, but
I feel it works better when it's dry. When they crawl through it, when it's dry, it cuts them, and then when they leave, you have it's like, I'll put it this way: I use it for leaves in my house, and if you use it in the summertime when it's humid and you can have an air conditioner on, it worked, but not real good. Put the air conditioner on. Works like a well, you put it on the ground.
but the bees can. I mean, if they're in a colander, they can collect it. They can, but in most cases, they don't. They don't.
Because I'm going by what I see with the fleas in my house. When I had a dog and I had fleas, it didn't work best with low humidity.
Okay. So I apologize. And I don't use it at all. It's not something that I use. The other thing is, like I mentioned before about the debris, make sure if you use whiteboards or use screen bottom boards, keep your boards. If you solid, the bees will keep your bottom boards clean. The small hive beetles that's where they like to feed, larvae will feed in there. They will, if you don't keep your boards clean, once a week I go and I clean my boards if I use. Yeah. Ask 2 beekeepers. So go ahead. This is another one. Again, I know, George, you use these, right? Or do you use these at all? These are traps that are made to go underneath your screen bottom boards. They don't work with most of the ones that Forest Hill make because there's not enough clearance, but you can shim your hive up and put these under. You can put diatomaceous earth in this. You can also put oil, like an oil trap with some vinegar. This will also work for small. Someone asked me to come out and look at their hives recently. They had a small hive beetle problem. Oh my gosh. And they had thousands of small hive beetles in these traps.
When diatomaceous earth at the bottom of that wet.
Yeah, you'll get a sludge.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So all right. Something I learned something new today. So.
They're called Freeman bottom boards.
Freeman. Okay.
They do work, but you got to
Yeah, I think Apium also makes their pollen trap can be converted into that. Yeah. We'll just quickly talk about mice. They'll enter in the cold weather and they'll make nests in the hive. So when the bees are clustered, they don't find the mice, or the mice come in after the bees are in cluster. They'll essentially destroy your comb, especially if you're using freeform or wax foundation. They'll chew up all the foundation, destroy your comb, they'll make nests, they'll urinate all over the place and destroy your comb. If the bees get to them, they'll sting them to death and they'll purplize them. You'll find these little bugs in your hive. Get your mouse guards. I've actually got my mouse guards on now because because of robbing, I put on, instead of putting introduce, I thought I'll go ahead and put my mouse guards on. The one on the bottom left is the commercial one that's made. There's also ones that can use as introducers and moving hives. Now when you have 40 hives, you get cheap. You don't want to spend the money, a couple of bucks they charge for the other ones. Just use 1/4-inch hardware cloth. I just screw it on the hives. I put a little bit of that Gorilla Tape I talked about. I screw it in, and then I get the political signs. I cut them up, and I use those as kind of an introducer on my hives. Again, I usually install them when it gets consistently below 50 degrees at night. But again, I'm already putting them on now. So. Skunks is the last thing I'll talk about. They will disturb your cluster. They'll scratch on the front of the hive. They'll eat the bees. They'll chew up their body. You'll find kind of these wads. Those I forgot what they call them, but like skunk balls. They'll just actually spit out. They'll chew up and then they'll just chew out. They'll throw out the exoskeleton, the heads and the exoskeleton, and then you'll find these little balls in your yard that's indicative of skunks. They'll damage your equipment. I run wakeboards again in the winter, and I found all my wakeboards and a couple of them in the yard. I thought, how do they get out? Do we have strong winds that they get blown out? One day I went out and I saw paw prints all over it. The skunks were out there scratching. I think possums and probably groundhogs can also do this also. But you can use, some people use like a board with nails on it. You can put that kind of prevents the skunks. But you have to be careful you don't step on the boards and nails. So, but again, as long as you keep your hives up high enough, it exposes. They try to reach up to expose their bellies, and bees will sting them. But it can disturb your cluster. If your winter cluster, you want to keep your winter cluster tight, and they're disturbing your hive, you could have some issues because your bees are coming out of the cluster.
So much, but
Yes.
so I've got tremendous amount of equipment in my garage that I'd love to get out. For the last couple of years, I've been storing my equipment on a rack that I raised up, and where I've got pipe needles, I've got wax moths, I just found a button mouse this other day. I want to move my equipment under cover, and if I can get it under cover, I'm thinking about putting out a solar panel and putting some lights in there for the wax moth and stuff. I was going to buy another shed, but for the amount of money it's going to cost me to level the ground, if I'll have a shed set up there, I'm thinking those carports that are cloth, I've got an area in my garden that's kind of a little bit weak, it's tucked away. But I just use a carport, cloth carport, set that up.
The cloth what? Cloth what?
Carport.
Oh, carport. Okay, carport.
And then, put up some solar panels and put some lights in there and just store my equipment that way outside.
As long as it doesn't blow over, get heavy rains and all.
It'll be beside the fence and beside the trees, so it's pretty.
Yeah.
And tucked down.
Yeah.
That's what the forest to sit outside.
Yeah, and you can do this like the Georgia. You can put queen excluders on top and bottom. That'll keep the mice out, and then ratchet everything together. You can even put it on its side, and then you want to just kind of protect it from the rain and wind. But you can store them.
I would just worry about the snow and.
Yeah, yeah.
No need for that.
Okay.
And then
Someone's already figured it out.
And this has to do with stresses. Because stresses, when you switch over my plastic, clean excluders, right?
Oh, I hate the
Some
plastic.
now clean excluders, and they have become hive beetle traps because
Yeah,
for some reason the hive beetles
they get under the tracks. I'm trying to go towards the metal bound ones. I wish I had done the metal bound ones
This is
initially. Yeah. I'm not metal bound. Sorry, the wood bound ones. Yeah, the wood bound ones that have the wood around the trim around the side.
Can I shoot hot glue or something in there to close up the space?
Sure. Yeah. It may wind up cracking. They're using caulking or something. No, usually Better Be Done, the bee supply companies. You have to use.
It's about $38 for a bottle. Well, I have the liquid and it's 40.
Yeah.
Powder.
It comes in a, it comes in, I think it comes in a, because again, I use Zenteri, so.
What did you say before?
Zenteri.
How do you spell that?
Xentari.
What was that?
Xentari. Xentari. And it's the same exact organism. That's the only organism that works for wax moths. The same organism. It's like using moth crystal at Target versus buying Paramount. So
You find those sprays, it's generally whatever, when you're spraying the spray.
Sometimes bees don't produce, they could, have any larva that goes in the bottle.
doesn't only wax moth is the only thing that affects it. It's very safe for bees.
It just seemed like once I sprayed that, maybe I overdid it with the spray, that the queen wouldn't lay any eggs. It just seemed like for a while.
I mean, again, I use it for winter storage. I don't do it during the season.
Right.
I put it on, and as long as it's dry, then once it dries, it's dry, then it dries into a. You buy it on an I buy it online. It's sometimes the shipping costs you just as much as the products that you buy and share it with a bunch of people. But it's like $40 or so for it's maybe $25 for the product, $15 for shipping. But okay. And then I would only keep it for a year or two max. Somebody told me that they had an issue the second year it didn't work. So, but I've used mine for 2 years. It's a blue bag. It's a blue bag. 1 pound. And 1 pound will last the whole club. It's a lot of products. You only need like 2 teaspoons I use per gallon. So it's then you dissolve it in water and then just spray it out.
Spray aside the comb.
Yeah,
That's the side. So when you're spraying, the comb's tilted in, make sure you're going on an angle when you're spraying back and forth, so it goes into the depth of the comb itself. And then I shake them out and let them dry on the side of my house in the shade, so it's let the wind blow, and then once you're dry, put them away. Cool.
Yep.
Thanks, Gina.